Very warm greetings everyone. Welcome to the special lecture series of sign language, and I welcome all of you along with my co-presenter Manisha Sharma. And this lecture series is in continuation with the introduction to environmental economics. This is part lecture number 3. So in this lecture, there are certain learning objectives. The first learning objective would be to understand the notion of individual preferences concerning environmental protection, to comprehend 3 main principles of individual preferences related to environmental protection, then to comprehend the social choice from individual values, to understand the notion of utilitarian perspective, then critically analyze the utilitarian perspective as well. So first let us understand what is individual preferences regarding environmental protection. Not everybody is bothered about it, as you all know. It's a recent phenomena, and the concern regarding the environmental issues is recent. There are 2 issues regarding environmental protection. Firstly, how do individuals view environment? Secondly, even if they will view environment in different ways, how do we collect and aggregate all these individuals' opinion to create one common opinion for the society as a whole? Individual preferences are much more likely to be contentious than how we aggregate all those individual opinions and form one notion or one policy. If society consists of all those individuals who prefer a weekend in front of the TV, any TV program on a weekend, and the alternative is hiking in a wilderness area. So there are 2 alternatives, then how will you make a common decision? When an economist measures, they measure it through willingness to pay. Willingness to pay for wilderness protection, or if the number is not large, then no policy will be formulated. So there are 4 different philosophical perspectives, or you can say notions, regarding environmental protection in environmental ethics. This area is considered as environmental ethics. Under environmental ethics, we have 3 different alternative views or perspectives regarding the notion of environmental ethics. First is biocentrism. Second is anthropocentrism. Then finally, the precautionary principle. Let us first look at biocentrism. What do you understand by biocentrism aspect of environmental protection philosophically? Now, it encompasses several different philosophical views of human and environment. Biocentrism places biological world, primarily non-humans, at the center of value system. An important distinction in this concept is made in biocentrism between the instrumental value and the intrinsic value. So every living species on this earth has 2 types of value: intrinsic and instrumental value. You can categorize and you can measure that value in that various ways. Instrumental value. Let us first understand what you mean by the instrumental value of any living organism on this planet. It pertains to the usefulness aspect of living being. If anything that serves as an instrument in achieving some useful objective, it is said to have instrumental value. This is the basic definition of instrumental value of any living organism. Biocentrism actually stems from the Greek word, which is called bios, and bios means life, and kentron, which basically means center, and is the ethical belief that extends inherent value to all the living species, living things around us. In other words, it argues that all living things have equal moral standing and they deserve equal moral consideration on the moral grounds, ethical grounds. On the other hand, the intrinsic value here, if we talk about, we have seen the instrumental value. Now let us understand the intrinsic value of biocentrism concept. The intrinsic value does not pertain to the usefulness. Something can be very, very useless and still have an intrinsic value. For example, you would have heard about a virus called a smallpox virus. The instrumental value of this particular species is, if you can categorize or value it, it can be go to the negative value. It is not useful to any of the creature. We can't say that it will give any usefulness to any species around the planet. Yet it is argued from the moral perspective that the life itself has an intrinsic value and it is intrinsically valuable. So it has a value because of this reason. So human life has intrinsic value regardless of any deed or action performed by the human species. So this is regarding human species. It is a philosophy, biocentrism is a philosophy that all living things have intrinsic value regardless of their instrumental value. So if their instrumental value is 0, still they will continue to have an intrinsic value. Most of the people believe that it is acceptable to take an animal's life to provide sustenance, but it would be wrong to kill a human for the same reason. So there was a very famous biocentric researcher named as Aldo Leopold. Aldo Leopold was influential in determining the modern environmental ethics and the movement of wilderness conservation. His nature and wildlife preservation ethics profoundly impacted the environmental movement across the world with his ecocentric or holistic ethics regarding the land issues. He emphasized biodiversity and ecology and was a founder of Science of Wildlife Management. Aldo Leopold viewed ecosystems as intrinsically valuable, but not individual ecosystem members as intrinsically valuable. So the whole of the ecosystem was considered, according to him, as intrinsically valuable commodity or a product. A second view of environmental ethics is anthropocentrism. Anthropocentrism believes that it exists only one purpose of human to provide material gratification to humans. So basically, the notion behind anthropocentrism is that environment exists only to provide some kind of material gratification to the human life or human existence. Anthropocentrism refers to the human-centric or anthropocentric point of view. In philosophy, anthropocentrism can refer to the point of view that humans are the only or primarily holders of moral standing. It is important to distinguish here from the concept of utilitarianism. Utilitarian concerning the environment emphasizes the well-being of people who attain from the environment, whether it can be materialistic well-being, spiritual well-being, instrumental or intrinsic. Any kind of well-being if you derive, then you come under the perspective or purview of utilitarianism. it places only the instrumental value on the environment. So basically, when you are viewing, human species are viewing environment, they are only looking at the instrumental value of the environment. There is no intrinsic value that exists. Like for example, if we consider the case of California catcher, which is a species and which is of no use for humans, then there is no value which a strict anthroposis will allot to it or will assign to it. Utilitarian, on the other hand, would admit that the individual value, no matter what the source of that value is, there is an individual value, individual value attached to anything. Maybe it may be because of some spiritual gain, it may be because of you can say any materialistic gain, instrumental gain, intrinsic gain. So these are different variety of utilities one can derive. So some kind of utility is attached according to the utilitarian point of view. If someone obtains a warm and good feeling from knowing that the gnatcatcher, which is a species, is alive, and then that is considered as a utilitarian value, because just they are deriving some kind of happiness or satisfaction from the fact. And another example is standing forests. If you see forests around, then there is no instrumental value. Even if there is no instrumental value, they may exist, people may value it just by admiring the greenery around. So that is again a utilitarian value. Now we move on to the third type of notion of environmental ethics, that is known as precautionary principle. One of the main issues in the modern environmental thinking is that the future is uncertain. One cannot predict future. Not so, it is so much so that in terms of environmental action, it is completely unpredictable. But more so in the sense that no matter how careful we take every step or every day, there are unexpected events. They may occur and they will occur to rule the day. So, and this unexpected incidents or happenings, they may tend to occur every day. Since the future is unknown and then there is an uncertainty attached, so there emerges a concept which is a concept of safe minimum standard. More recently, it is known as precautionary principle. The safe minimum standard at its extreme can be roughly characterized as minimizing the regrets. Minimizing the regrets is a concept that is assigned to what we know as safe minimum standards, and this concept completely is known as precautionary principle. Under the precautionary principle, one of the very remarkable example one can see is the methyl tertiary ether, MTB, most commonly known as MTBE. So it is a flammable liquid that has been used as an additive for unleaded gasoline since 1980s. Now this MTBE increases the octane and oxygen levels in the gasoline and reduces the pollution emissions. Basically, the purpose of MTBE was to reduce the pollution emissions. MTBE is added to gasoline to help improve the urban air quality. So the purpose of this particular commodity or this mixture was basically to reduce the urban air quality. It was, however, later realized that it is highly water soluble. So when you are actually proceeding towards environmental quality and making steps and implementing various policies technically and efficiently and cost effectively, but later on you realize that you have landed up with some other unforeseen mishap or a damage or a disaster. Now MTB started contaminating the groundwater. Unfortunately, the groundwater contamination by MTB has been a widespread incident and started affecting the health of lot of species including humans. In case of building the dam or eliminating an endangered species, one should not look at the expected value of the species and build the dam, but rather one should look at the fact that you might find that you want that species for some unspecified reason, because not every species will be having an instrumental value. Rather, the existence of species itself should have an intrinsic value, and it is later on realized. So that's why it is later on realized with course of time that what instrumental value it may have in future. So for some unspecified reason far into the future, and on the basis of the one should decide not to build a dam. So basically, development, constructions which harm one set of species should not be undertaken, and that comes under the ground of precautionary principle of environmental ethics. Now, there is a famous environmentalist, Bischoff, in 1978, argues that it will not be easy to implement for making an actual decision on the public policy. Why are we all talking about environmental ethics and all? Because we need to implement one common policy that is acceptable to all the members in the society. Given the fact that every member in the society is in conflict with other person, they do not come to the same opinion. Still, this is an attempt to understand, giving the common background of philosophical ethics to environmental protection of the entire ecosystem actually. So this concept of minimizing regrets, no matter how unlikely they may occur, this unforeseen circumstances may occur, may paralyze the decision making process also, because things which we are talking about and for which we are taking steps and making policies, they are unpredictable. So is it ethical to spend money on it, or provide policies and measure them and put cost to it, or it is an unnecessary expenditure? However, there was a Rio Declaration of States, Principle 15, when it says, when there are threats of serious or irreversible damage, that is lack of full scientific certainty, shall not be used as a reason for postponing the cost. Effective measures must be implemented to prevent environmental degradation. So slowly, under the regime of UN and declaration, steps were taken that were common steps, and they were ratified, and they were being accepted by a lot of nations together. The safe minimum standard and precautionary principle, they apply when there is an uncertainty and as well as irreversibility when it comes to the damages. The basic principle is to err and how to quantify, how to take into the normal practices should be modified to remain that remains ambiguous. That what kind of a activity or actions to be taken and how to quantify the damage, that is definitely ambiguous. So one has to have a vague or ambiguous kind of a valuation method. So this was all regarding the three types of environmental ethics principle policies, where we take a stand for environmental quality, the environmental aspect, because environmental quality is considered as a public good, and when it comes as a public good, It affects every human living in the nation and across societies and communities, and therefore the steps have to be taken. On what grounds it has to be taken? On what ethical grounds you have the policies to be implemented, and state has to take an action. So there are various philosophical aspects which we talked about regarding this particular session, where we said that there are basically three different aspects or point of view where the philosophical aspects, where the philosophical standing or the grounding can be made for the environmental quality and protection. So this was so we basically come up with the next kind of discussion, which is on the social issue from the individual values allotted according to these three concepts of environmental ethics. So we will continue after a short break.